Hi, well, I'm back. I know it's been a while, but I didn't really have much to report. I said I'd do something again once something significant comes up, and I have surgery tomorrow to remove my ostomy bag. I don't know if you can see this thing attached to me, but oh God, let me tell you, if they ever put one on you, it sucks. It's probably the worst experience of my entire life. Yeah, I know if it's between cancer and dying in this ostomy bag, I'd rather have the ostomy bag, but I'm just very thankful that I only had it on for, let's see, since my surgery, June 22nd. Now, what's interesting is a couple of things have happened. Notice my hair's come back. It's also darker like it used to be, so that's kind of cool. So when I got out of the surgery, they said you need like 8 weeks to recover. Now, this was the surgeon talking. And she said after 8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks to be precise, we will have another surgery for you to remove the ostomy bag. Now, when I was going into surgery, it was barely ever mentioned anything about an ostomy bag. In fact, they never mentioned it to me directly. A friend of mine asked in an email, and she said there's a possibility. So I think covered that before, but as you can imagine, I was kind of shocked to wake up and have this thing on me. So I'm like, okay, 8 to 10 weeks, have the surgery, get off. How bad can it be? Pretty bad. For me, the thing kept filling up constantly. I mean, there could be time, and there's no rhyme or reason. So a good example, I emptied the bag before I went to Costco. It's about a 10-minute drive for me. I get to Costco and it's full. Full. So I'm like, oh crap. I mean, no pun intended. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? So I went into Costco and emptied the thing out. But it just kept filling up. And it was liquidy. I mean, like, literally like dirty water. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. You know, I could empty it every hour for 3 hours straight, or it might go 6 hours without having to be, like when I sleep. Actually, most of the time when I sleep, I haven't been sleeping great because I have to sleep on my back, and because I don't want to roll over and have this thing pop on me. So I've been falling asleep like at 2 in the morning, and then at 3 I'll empty it, and then like 5 I'll empty it, and then at like 9 I'll empty it. So, like I said, I don't understand how it fills up so much, and how liquidy it was. I mean, every now and then it'd be kind of mushy, but very rare. I know that sounds horrible, but if you ever have to have one, just know that that's a possibility. So I think I mentioned before, if you recall, I went in to have surgery originally, and they put the epidural in my back, and that's when they called off the surgery, saying that one of the chemos that I'd had should have been removed from the list, like I thought, and because of that, it could cause bleeding, so they moved my surgery out. Well, when they moved the surgery out, I had like 3 weeks of no chemo, no nothing, which was awesome. And I go in for the surgery. Well, the day I go in for the surgery, they also had me scheduled for chemo. So I called them ahead of time and said, hey, look, they had to move my surgery. I can't do the chemo because I'm having surgery. And they're like, okay, and they canceled it. So I'm recovering. It's been weeks, and this ostomy bag is coming off. It's leaking constantly. I'm not doing something right. They showed me one time in the hospital how to put the thing on. And there'd be times that I'd put it on and it would stay a couple of days. And then there'd be times where I'd put it on and it would literally start leaking within a minute because some fold or flap didn't work right, sticking it on. So I went to the emergency room. Well, first I called because I was supposed to have an in-home nurse come to me. But when I called the hospital, they said they had no record of that. And the surgeon was out of town, so they couldn't do it. So I'm like, well, I've already met my deductible for the year. I'm going to the emergency room, which I did. And these really nice ladies showed me how to put it on. And I said, okay, great. And then they actually gave me a different kind and a different method to put it on. I'm like, oh, that's nothing like they showed me briefly. So that was on a Wednesday. Well, Friday was my birthday. This was back in July. And I'm thinking, I don't want to go to my birthday and worry about this thing. And they said, well, you can come back on Friday and we'll see how it's working and we'll put another one on for you. And I said, great. Well, while I'm in there on the Wednesday and they're telling me this, they're looking at my scar, which I don't know if I ever showed it. You can see there's the scar going all the way down. They said, when are you having your staples removed? And I said, I don't know. Nobody's ever contacted me about getting my staples removed. Literally the day that I left the hospital, nobody ever got a hold of me. It was always me contacting them. And so when I went back on Friday for them to put a new bag on, they removed the staples. And I'm like, okay. And it hurt. I mean, it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it didn't feel great. So I contact the surgeon and say, hey, I got the staples removed. It's the end of July. When am I going to be having, I think I've got another couple weeks and then have this surgery. She emailed me back and said, still got more time. We don't want to rush things. I'm like, okay, just really want to get this thing off. So I just literally stayed at home on disability, which, oh my God, disability. I still haven't gotten any of my money for being on disability. It is such a pain in the ass to get the money. Now, I've worked since I was 18 years old, and I've never not had a job. I mean, I've literally gone from job to job to job to job and never had time off in between. I have not even taken vacation in like 2 years. So I sign up for the disability money, and I don't hear anything. And my company said that they sent their stuff in. So I'm like, okay, well, that's weird. And I also have disability insurance through my company. And so I just had to jump through all these hoops to get the money from them. And as it turns out, after, I think it was the first week of August, I get my first check from the insurance company through my work. $20 for my whole paycheck. $20. I thought the money was supposed to be, like, if you have ever looked into disability insurance, they only pay you like 60% of your salary. And I thought the disability insurance through my company would pay the difference. Nope. $20. So I ended up, and this was after going through tons of hoops, sending them all this information, them saying, oh, well, we show that you were going to be going back to work this date, and why are you needing all this extra time, and you need to prove, and for $20 a paycheck. I think I got 6 checks for $20 each. Ridiculous. Well, so here it is, September, right? Yeah, it's September. And still no disability checks. No information about it. Well, I look on the website and I call the number. 3 hours I was on hold. Now that's just to get on hold. They're one of those phone trees where you go through and it takes like 10 minutes to get to the right place. So I wrote down all the numbers so I could just go beep, 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 beep and go right through it. But you get through the phone tree and after 10 minutes they can say, oh, sorry, there's too many people already on hold. Goodbye. So after calling and calling and calling, I finally get on hold, and I'm on hold for 3 hours. So while I'm on hold, I hear them mention on the phone in the recording, oh, you can go to the website. Yeah, I already did that. But it said you need to make sure that your health provider sends the documentation in to the state. Now, when I talked to the insurance lady for my company, she said that Kaiser is notorious for not letting their doctors fill out any of that information to send in, and it's a pain in the ass. And I found out it was a pain in the ass. I had to go through a department, so I had to get documents from the doctor to give to the department. The doctors couldn't just send it to them. No. I had to request them and then send them over, and then they would review them and then fill out what I asked, and then they'd send it back to me, and then I'd have to send it to the appropriate place. So I already knew it was a pain in the ass doing that. So I go check, and even though I had told in the document when you fill it out for SDI, which is the state disability insurance, when I filled it out, it said, who is your medical provider? And I put down Kaiser, put down all their information. Well, just like the insurance company, they won't fill it out. So all these months, I've been waiting for Kaiser to send this information to the state, and they won't do it. So I had to get all the documentation, find the right department, give them the documentation, tell them this reference number that I got off the website, and say, you need to fill it out and send it to this. So major pain in the ass. If you ever have to go on disability, you're going to have to go through hoops. It's going to be a pain in the butt, but do it quick and do it like immediately, because I did everything right and I still haven't gotten a check. And that was 2.5 weeks ago, where Kaiser wrote me back and said, we filled out your information. So still nothing. Okay. So here I am waiting around at home for my checks. I've got nothing scheduled. Nobody's contacting me. I'm just contacting the surgeon asking when my surgery is going to be, because I want this damn bag off. And from what I recall, originally when I talked to the cancer doctor, the word is escaping me at the moment, begins with an O, but he had said, we're going to fight this aggressively. We're going to do chemo, surgery, chemo. Well, after the surgery, well, I should say during the surgery, well, not during, I was out. Before the surgery, I thought that the surgeon had said, okay, you did your chemo, we're doing the surgery, we'll then do a CT scan, see how it looks, and then if it's clear, we'll do the surgery to remove the bag and you'll be good. I think that's right. Chemo, surgery, yeah, CT, last surgery, good to go. So I was like, okay, well, I just need to get a hold of her. Nothing else happens until I get this surgery, get this bag off. So I contacted a bunch of times, and during this time, my sister-in-law, ex-sister-in-law, sends me some articles about this guy who found out he had cancer all over, and they basically gave him 6 months to live. They're like, you're too far gone, there's nothing we can do, we can make your life comfortable kind of crap. And he was telling people this, and I think I might have mentioned this in one of my previous videos. He told one of his friends who's a veterinarian, and the veterinarian says, hey, I've heard some research that was done. Take this dog deworming medication, along with, like, he was taking vitamin A, vitamin C, this dog deworming medication. Cancer went away. Completely gone. So I'm reading this article, I'm like, dang. So I look into the medication some more. It's been used on humans. A lot like, kind of reminds me of what this Joe Rogan, the press was saying he was using this horse medication, but it's not horse medication, people. It was a medication that's been used on humans, got a Nobel Prize. You can get prescriptions for it. It does some good. I don't think they've ever proven that it does good for COVID, but Rogan took it. He was better in a couple of days, but that's neither here nor there. I'm vaccinated, just so you know. So here's this dog deworming medication that apparently does something to the tumors. So I'm like, okay, and it doesn't seem to have any adverse effects on humans. So I buy some through Amazon, the exact ones that this guy used. And I took it. Well, funny thing happens. I took it, it says to take it 3 days on and then 4 days off, and then 3 days on, 4 days off, and just continue doing that. Didn't really say for how long. And by the way, there were other articles than just the one she sent me. I did a bunch of research. So I take the meds, and about 2 or 3 days after I take the meds, my stomach starts hurting, and I start dry heaving. And after about 4 days, I'm not feeling too great. So I go to the hospital and, go to the emergency room. Might as well. I don't pay for any of that anymore. And they run my blood pressure, and it's so low. And I normally, before I had my surgery, my blood pressure was way up here. And they're like, oh, we're really concerned about your high blood pressure. And I'm on high blood pressure medication. My blood pressure was so low that the machine was thinking there was an error. So they got me a better machine, and then they were like, oh my God, you got really low blood pressure. So they brought me into this room, and I hope I didn't mention this all in the previous video, but I can't remember, but hey, it's a good story. So I go in, and they're talking to me, and they're like, okay, we want some blood tests, and like, how do you feel? I'm like, I actually feel pretty good. They're like, okay, we're going to release you in a couple of hours. Blood tests come back, and they're like, you need emergency dialysis. What? They're like, you got super dehydrated, your kidneys are failing, your potassium level's at an 8.5 and it should be at a 2. So you need to do dialysis, emergency kidney dialysis. I'm like, oh crap. Well, any of you who've ever had it done, and I would imagine 99% of the people who ever might watch this don't know, they do it through your neck. So they had to surgically graft this pod on my neck. Oh my God, it hurt. Oh, and I should mention that before all this happened, I was still feeling pretty bad. And this was on a Tuesday. I had an enema, a barium enema test. And I needed that because that would determine if there was any leakage in my colon. If there was, something was going to have to happen. If there wasn't, I could have the surgery or move the bag. I had that on a Tuesday. Oh my God. Most miserable experience compounded with having this bag. I will take a colonoscopy any day of the week over an enema. It was horrible. And I was in there for like 45 minutes with this thing shoved up my butt. Oh God, it was just an awful experience. And I wasn't feeling good. But, so I was in the hospital on a Tuesday for that. And then Friday I go in, and that's when they said I was super dehydrated. I needed to go on kidney dialysis immediately. They told me that at 2 p.m. They started the emergency dialysis at 10 p.m. at night. So I guess it wasn't so much of an emergency. And that lasted 4 hours. Well, after doing that, my levels all turned to normal. I was there a couple more days, and everything just kept going down, 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 and then they released me. Now, the worst part was I went in there thinking it was the medication I took. So, of course, I bring the package in, and I get to explain to them, hey, my ex-sister-in-law sent me all this research she did and on the internet, and this medication has been shown. This guy was cured with his cancer, and and I read got all this other information. It's supposed to be okay for humans. Even though I'm feeling awful, I hadn't read any adverse side effects that I'm having should be associated with the medication, but that's the only thing I can think of that's causing me my gut pain. Well, imagine how I said that, trying to make it not sound as bad as it was. And every time somebody came in, they would say, yeah, this guy read an article on the internet about taking deworming medication to cure cancer. Yeah, I was the idiot I was the laughing stock of the ICU. So it turns out, though, that the medication affects your kidneys, or excuse me, affects your liver, not your kidneys. So they said, based on all the research they'd done, the pain in my gut and my dry heaving had nothing to do with the medication. Now, I'm a little leery to take that medication again just because it happened, but they said I got dehydrated. And I got so dehydrated that my kidney started to fail, and that it wasn't filtering my potassium, which went way up. I was drinking like a fish. I was drinking water all the time. Basically this huge thing, which is full of ice water, constantly, and Gatorade. When I left, the doctor said, you need to keep hydrated. Drink 2 of these Gatorade things a day, you'll be good. I was drinking Gatorade, I was drinking water. Well, they tell me, yeah, don't drink water. What? I thought that's what you did when you're dehydrated. Apparently not. Water goes right through you. They said you should drink broths and juices and things like that. And I'm like, well, I was also drinking Gatorade, but I was drinking, like, I guess the sugar ones. And even though I was drinking a bunch of it, it wasn't enough. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So that happened to me during that time. And the only good thing about that was when they were trying to figure out what had happened, why I was having this gut pain, they did x-rays and did a CT scan. So I'm like, great, I was supposed to get a CT scan. I now have one. So when I got out of the hospital, I emailed the surgeon and said, hey, I got my CT scan done. Take a look. How's it look? Can I get this bag removed? Now, I will say, while I was there at the hospital, I asked the doctor, I said, the one who, the dialysis person, put the thing in my neck and took it off. I said, did you look at the CT? And she said, yes. And I said, did you notice if there was any cancer? Well, I find out if you're not a cancer doctor and you're looking for something else, they really don't notice things like that. So it's if I go in there for a cough and they do a CT, they're not looking for cancer. They're looking for what's causing the cough. So she was basically like, I looked at it, I didn't see anything, but I really wasn't looking for it, so it doesn't really mean anything. I'm like, oh, all right. So it's now the end of August. And I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to go back to work on September 7th, and I don't want to go back to work with this damn bag on me. So I email the surgeon and say, hey, look, it's been 10 weeks because I had my surgery June 22nd. Can I get this bag removed? Nothing. My regular doctor followed up with me because she found out I went into the hospital for the dehydration. And I told her, I said, I haven't been able to get a hold of the surgeon to find out when I have this surgery so that I can move on to the next phase if there is any. She's like, I'll get a hold of her. Great. Nothing. So finally I called the oncologist. That's the cancer person. I emailed the oncologist. And I'm like, hey, just want to let you know, they still haven't scheduled me for the surgery so they can remove the bag. So I don't know what's going on, but there was a CT scan done. If you wanted to look at the CT scan to see if there's cancer, you can. couple hours go by, and all of a sudden I'm getting all these emails. I'm like, what the hell is this? It's my oncologist. And he says, we need to get you back on chemo immediately. I'm like, what? And I'm thinking, I thought the surgeon had said chemo, surgery, CT scan. If it's good, surgery, remove the bag, and I might not need anything again. But as the oncologist said in the email, remember, our whole plan of attack was chemo, surgery, chemo. I'm like, oh, crap. All right. So I told him, I said, well, I've been trying to get this surgery. It's already past the time that I was supposed to have it. I can start up the chemo as soon as I have the surgery. And he's like, no, you need chemo immediately. So I email back. I'm like, okay, if I need chemo immediately, then how come it's been that I've been the one who's done all the communicating with everybody? Nobody's ever gotten back to me about anything without me first asking. Nobody got back to me about getting my staples removed. I just happened to go to the emergency room and they noticed I had the staples and removed them. Nobody ever asked me to do any follow-up blood tests. They've been keeping me in the dark about the next surgery. I was pretty pissed to go from, I haven't heard anything from anybody, to, we need to do this so soon that you need to drop everything else. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So he writes me back and says, well, you remember how you had your surgery the same day as, still have my cough, but it's better. You had your surgery the same day you were going to do chemo and you called to cancel chemo? I'm like, yeah. And he said, well, apparently once you canceled the chemo, they took you out of the system, so nobody knew to contact you. You are freaking kidding me. So I've been waiting around all this time, and because nobody bothered to get back to me, because I had basically been removed from their call list because I canceled a surgery or canceled a chemo they scheduled for the same day as my surgery. Left hand not talking to right hand. Ridiculous. Just like with the billing. Doctor can't give the stuff to the billing department. No, they got to give it to me and I have to give it to them. Well, in this case, surgeon not talking with oncologist to find out any information, not talking with the people who schedule the stuff. So I'm basically in limbo and nobody's telling me anything. Now, part of it's my fault because I should have contacted the oncologist sooner, but I thought everything hinged on the surgery. So why contact the oncologist? Because I need to have this surgery first. So I'm like, okay, well, can I have the surgery while I'm doing chemo? And he's like, no, you can't, it's risky. It's too risky. And he says, you're going from the 5 chemo treatments you did before down to 3. I'll still have to have that take-home ball one. Not sure what the other 2 are, but I know the hair loss one is not one of them. I'm hoping the cold sensitivity is the other one. But he said, we need to start you on this. I'm going to talk to your surgeon. We're going to do 3 months of chemo like we did before, where it's go in one day, 3 chemo sessions every 2 weeks for 3 months. And then after that, you can have your surgery. I'm like, Jesus. So I went from having 8 to 10 weeks to 22 weeks for this bag. I was pissed. So I'm like, all right, if that's how it's got to be, that's how it's got to be. So I'm like, all right, they can contact me. Oops, sorry about that. Ring saying there's someone at the door. So I'm like, all right, let's do it. And he says, I'm going to have somebody call you. I'm like, you're sure? And he's like, yeah, we're going to have somebody call and schedule it. Fine. I think this was like on a Wednesday that he said this. And then it was the Labor Day weekend. So Wednesday goes by, Thursday goes by, Friday goes by. I'm like, well, they're not calling me on Monday. Tuesday, get a call. It says Kaiser. I'm like, okay, guess they're calling to schedule it. It's the surgeon's office. They're like, we have an opening on the 14th. Would you like to have your surgery? I'm like, yeah, I would. So I'm like, great, I've got that scheduled. And I figured, when they call to do the chemo, I'll do it right after that. Literally 2 hours later, the chemo people called and said, hey, we want to schedule your chemo for the 14th. I'm like, no, I already talked to the surgeon's office. I'm getting the surgery on the 14th. How about I get chemo, since apparently the surgery most of the time is just an overnight stay. So I said, how about I start chemo again on Thursday? She's like, okay. So she sets me up, schedules all it out for like a month. Great. So a couple of days ago, I email my oncologist and say, hey, just want to let you know they're able to fit me in for surgery. I'm going in for surgery on Tuesday. They scheduled me to start the surgery on Tuesday, tomorrow, the 14th. And they scheduled me for the chemo 2 days later. Surgeon called first. So then I get an email from him saying, no, that's not going to work. You need more time to recover. We're going to schedule chemo for the first week of October. So now I'm like, okay, what does as soon as possible mean? Because to me, soon as possible, when you're talking about cancer, should have been like 2 weeks ago. But then I'm thinking, when I had to have emergency dialysis, it was 8 hours later. So none of it makes any sense to me. So regardless, I'm now at the point where tomorrow I have the surgery to move the bag. It's supposed to be just an overnight thing, but I didn't trust after hearing that, so I asked the guy who called me to tell me about, don't eat 8 hours before, and are you allergic to this again? And I said, am I going to be in there just overnight? And he says, you're going to be in there as long as it takes for you to get better. All right. So I'm hoping it's just overnight. So that happens on tomorrow. And then the first week of October, I start my chemo again. And I moved my date of workout to 9/27. So it'd give me a week after the surgery to see how I'm affected, since I haven't had surgery since the last one. I don't know, am I going to feel differently? I haven't literally pooed for real since, June. Is that all going to work still? So I kind of hoped that I would have the chemo also under my belt, because the last time I had chemo, I had all my organs. So there is a possibility, I guess, that I could extend my work off time until after I have my first chemo session, but pretty sure I'm going to go back to work on the 27th because I need money. I need my paycheck. If I hadn't gotten a tax return that was pretty good, I'd be screwed. I haven't had any money coming except for $20 here and there from that one group since June. So my parents ended up helping me out a little bit. Thank God for that. I think I could have still made it, but it would have been like zero money left. So that's my update. Surgery tomorrow, then chemo. I'll check in after the surgery and let you guys know how it went and what it was like. So key things to take away from this call, or this YouTube casting. Number one, enemas suck. Number two, ostomy bags suck. Number three, if you're going to go on disability insurance, start the process as soon as you can, even while you're still at work. And number four, stay on top of everybody. Even if they say, we're going to get back to you in 3 weeks, get back to them a week later and say, hey, just want to make sure you're still getting a hold of me in 2 weeks for whatever reason, because they forgot about me, they can forget about you. So take care, and I will talk later.